My name is Sultan Barakat, and I am the Director of Research at the Brookings Doha Center, and I have the honor of moderating this very distinguished panel this afternoon on a very important topic. And I take the opportunity to welcome Your Excellencies, ambassadors, and other senior officials who are here today, as well as our viewers on Al Jazeera Mubashir, who are following up for this event. The focus of today's discussion is going to be on the liquefied natural gas. And as you know, we all living in very exciting, very dynamic, almost transformational time, really, in terms of energy and the options and the strategies that various countries can choose, both in terms of producers and equally important in terms of consumers. The drop in oil price have been significant over the last year or so, and the signs for its recovery are not particularly positive at the moment. Earlier this week, we had a very important meeting here in Doha that ended with no conclusive decision as to what the OPEC countries will be doing in the coming few weeks and months. To have all of that discussed, understood better, and in particular to try and draw more attention on the liquefied gas business and how it works, both from the perspective of Qatar as one of the major producers and continued to be, I think, until now, the leading producer, although there are other countries are catching up quickly in Australia with potentials in East Africa and elsewhere. Qatar plays a very important role in the liquefied gas industry, and from the perspective of the United States. United States, as you know, recently entered the market of export, is exporting now liquefied gas, and has its own weight, not just nationally, but internationally in terms of dictating policy and outcome of energy strategies. The liquefied gas and gas in general has a number of positive advantages over traditional forms of energy. And that with the lowering of the price, it may offer consumers greater opportunities to meet environmental demands and various other possibilities for diversification of energy sources and so on. But again, we don't necessarily see that being captured substantially around the world. There's still some fear, some concerns. You continue to hear about contexts like in China, Central Europe, etc. They're going back to coal, which doesn't quite make sense when the gas is readily available and cheap and accessible. To help us understand all these trends, and I'm sure there are many others which our two speakers will bring to the fore, we have two of the most important and distinguished experts, decision makers on this subject. Although they represent two generations, I think, between them we have a continuity of the story right from the very beginning of the 1970s until today. And there is a lot of expertise that we would like you to tap into during this session. And therefore, we designed it so that we have an hour, 15 minutes. And I know Amos is in a rush to catch a flight right after our discussion. We will keep the presentations limited. As our guest, and in this way I'm saying he's not just the guest of the Brookings Doha Center, but more so the guest of His Excellency al-Attiyah in Qatar, we would like to offer him 10 minutes to start in terms of introduction to the subject, and then we will start the debate. But before I ask him to say a few words, I'll just say a short introduction about his background. And I know for all of you, he's a well-known figure. But just to those who are here for the first time, Amos Hochstein is the special envoy and coordinator for international energy affairs, who leads the Bureau of Energy Resources at the United States State Department. He oversees the United States foreign policy engagement in the critical intersection of energy and national security. In his role, he advises Secretary Kerry on global energy security and diplomacy and promotes US interests to ensure energy resources are used to increase economic opportunity, stability, and prosperity, not just in the United States, but around the world. Mr. Hochstein previously served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy Diplomacy, where he led the Bureau of Energy Diplomacy efforts. And prior to that, for almost 15 years, he acted as an advisor for various US elected officials and candidates for public office and many other bodies. We're very honored to have him with us today, and I'd like to ask him to start with his 10 minutes intervention before I introduce His Excellency Abdullah al-Attiyah.
Thank you, Sultan. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to Brookings for hosting this event. You know, it's always there's nothing more intimidating to be a foreigner, to be an American, coming to do two things in Doha. One is to talk about LNG. Talking in Qatar as a non-Qatari about LNG is already a disadvantage when you're coming to the birthplace of LNG. And the other is to do that while sitting next to His Excellency al-Attiyah, who is world-renowned for everything he has done to create this sector. So I'm in a double disadvantage, but I take that challenge because it was a real opportunity for me to be able to sit with His Excellency to have this conversation. Because I believe that as we look at the energy markets today and the headlines, we see a dominant coverage of oil and oil markets and very little about the effects of natural gas. And I've been taught since I'm a little kid to never disagree with my host, but I'm going to disagree with my host on one thing. In his introduction, you said that we're in almost transformative. I'm only going to offer a slight change. I think we are in a transformational time. I think we're even more than that. I think we're living in a revolutionary time in energy overall. And what used to be a stagnant and constant oil market has been revolutionized over the last few decades, and it keeps getting the transformation keeps getting faster. And the reason I say that we're revolutionary times in energy, it's because it is not isolated to one aspect of the energy market or another. It's not about oil, it's not about gas, it's not about renewables, it's about everything. We're seeing the fact that the change in technology and innovation has allowed growth into new areas in oil exploration, whether it's the unconventional or it's the ultra-deep water. We're seeing that renewable energy has been able to compete with hydrocarbons in a way that nobody assumed before. We had a famous American journalist who wrote "Bring on $200 oil" a few years ago because the concept was there was no other way to develop an affordable market in renewable energy unless we had $200 oil. And yet in 2015, we had low prices of oil, and the investment in renewable energy was actually greater than it was in 2013 and 2014 when we had high oil prices. In the United States, we reached close to $45 billion of new investment in renewable energy in 2015, and worldwide at $329 billion in investment. The fact that all of this is happening at the same time is what I think is such a revolution, what is creating such a revolutionary effort. Now, looking at LNG and gas, what's happened over the last several years is that natural gas, which started really as a sideshow to oil, where you didn't want to even develop it, where to the point where we then moved to being able to deliver gas by pipeline, which was a Catholic marriage of sorts. Once you build a multi-billion-dollar project between the producer and the consumer, it was set, and you were committed to it for a very long time. And I'll get back to that point. We then, thanks in large part to the efforts of His Excellency al-Attiyah and Qatar, we developed an LNG market, which created the flexibility in the gas market and started the road to making natural gas a commodity that is tradable more and more independently. But I think that that transformation continues. It did not stop there, because you still, in gas, unlike in oil, you need infrastructure. You can't simply put oil onto a tanker, and like oil, move it onto a tanker and send it somewhere. You need the infrastructure to liquefy it. You need the infrastructure on the other side to regasify it. And therefore, not everybody can become a consumer. And it wasn't cheap. You had to build multi-billion dollars worth of infrastructure in order to receive the gas. But over the last several years, we've seen another development, and that is the FSRU, the Floating Storage and Regasification Unit, meaning I can order a boat that will dock in my waters and can serve as a regas facility. That just made natural gas, LNG, even more accessible, faster, and cheaper. Won't take you 3 to 5 years to build it anymore. It'll take you 18 months to get it. And that timeline is going down. It also means that you're more flexible as far as buying the gas. You can have a mix of spot price gas and long-term contracts, and it enables you to have that kind of flexibility. You don't have to buy the FSRU now. You can lease it. All of this is to say that I believe that natural gas is fast becoming a much more independent commodity to oil. We're seeing the price separation from a complete and total link to oil prices beginning to change. And if you want to look at examples of recent years, of recent days, over the last few weeks, the US oil prices went from below $30 to $42. And natural gas prices, the Henry Hub price, went from $1.70 something to $2. It did not jump anywhere near the ratio that oil did. The second part of the equation is what this means for the development. We have seen during the time of $100 oil, enormous amount of investment into the oil and gas sector around the world. And as a result, we are now seeing the following. From a world where Qatar was the single dominant LNG exporter, it's going to be joined by others, as was said by Sultan. And Australia will likely be at similar size to Qatar as far as exports by the end of the decade. And the United States, if everything is built that we have approved, will do the same. The US transformation has been nothing short of remarkable. When President Obama came into power, he was briefed about energy. And when it came to gas, the briefing was as follows. We don't have enough gas. We're the largest importer. We're going to be a far greater importer of LNG. And we will have to use our diplomatic efforts to ensure that we have a secure supply. As was said just a few minutes ago, a few weeks ago, we exported our first cargo. If you think of a 6-year transformation in an industry that didn't change very much over 100 years, that in 6 years we can go from being the largest importer with every analyst and expert in New York and London, on Wall Street and in London, saying that the graph showed that we were going to grow into the future, and that 6, 7 years later we were going to be in a position of not only not importing anymore, but converting our import facilities to export facilities. And Qatar is part of that transformation with us, with the recent announcement that we're moving forward on the Golden Pass terminal that Qatar has invested in the United States. That was originally supposed to be an import facility and is now being transformed into an export facility. But that means that we have a lot of gas coming on the market from the United States, Australia, and Qatar, but not there alone. Mozambique made the largest discovery in a long time. Tanzania, their neighbor to the north, made a similar discovery. We've all read about the discoveries in Israel, in Egypt, in Cyprus. There's more gas coming on the market. The question becomes, do we have the demand for it? And that's where I think that as we look for the next several years, we have to consider carefully the delinkage of natural gas, of LNG prices, to oil. Because I believe that even if we do see a rebound in oil prices, too many people are taking for granted that the old paradigms will continue. That as oil prices rise, LNG prices, gas prices, will rise in the same ratio that they used to. I'm not so sure that's accurate. I think we need to be prepared that we're putting a lot of LNG, a lot of gas on the market over the next few years. And that may mean that regardless of what happens in the oil markets, we may see prices of gas remain relatively low. I'm not saying they'll stay at the price where they are today, but relatively low. Where I think the benefit of this is that we need to look at gas as a transition fuel. If you look at what happened in the United States this past year, where for the first time we generated electricity more from gas than from coal, and the transition from coal to gas, which is happening as part of a market-driven phenomenon, where natural gas is so cheap that it's just simply an easier fuel to use. This is the kind of development that as we look post-Paris on climate, gas has to be a dear friend to us in the effort to transform and commit ourselves to the climate change goals. But not everywhere in the world are the policies in place to support that. And as we look into the future that's more than a year away or 3 years away, and in my opinion more than 2020, that's where we as governments have to start focusing. How do we put in place the kind of regulations and policies that will encourage the development of gas markets, that will encourage the investment in gas infrastructure and trading, the infrastructure meaning pipelines, to allow for that to grow, whether it's in India, in China, in Eastern Europe, in Central Europe. That's the effort that I think we have to focus on in order not to have a situation as we do now in some countries where the focus on renewables has actually meant an increase in renewables alongside an increase in coal and a decline in gas. Part of that is a diversification effort. And let me touch finally on this. Because of the structures of what I talked about before, of that original infrastructure side of gas, that was this, I called it a Catholic marriage between consumer and producer. If you look at Europe, we have two markets of gas in Europe. One that is diversified, traded, and that's on the west. But in the east and central, Balkans to Baltics, we have infrastructure that was built during the Soviet times that delivered gas from Russia through a set amount of pipelines that still operate today. If you are in Bulgaria or in Serbia or in Hungary, that is your only way to receive gas. There are no LNG terminals that can deliver gas into that area and no alternative mechanisms. So as we look into the future of LNG, and we can agree that LNG is the key, I believe, into this transition towards a cleaner future, it won't come without a change in policy, without a change in focus on diversification, on trading, on investment regulations, and in creating the environment that will allow for gas to become a dominant factor. If we do all of this, as we get to the end of this decade, not only will we see increased deliveries of product on the market of natural gas, but we will be creating new markets for it and allowing all of us to live side by side as producers, as exporters, in a more effective, more efficient, and cleaner world of energy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our second panelist today is His Excellency Abdullah bin Hamad al-Attiyah, who has more than 30 years of experience in this sector. And al-Attiyah, as you know, started in 1992 as the Minister for Energy and Industry and Chairman and Managing Director of Qatar Petroleum, and as Amos said, pretty much shaped the whole industry and the whole discussion around LNG that we're engaged with today. He occupied many senior positions in Qatar, including Second Deputy Prime Minister in 2003, and Deputy Prime Minister in 2011, and was later appointed as the Chief of the Emiri Diwan. His Excellency al-Attiyah today is the Chairman of Abdullah bin Hamad al-Attiyah Foundation for Energy and Sustainable Development, which is known to all of us here in Doha as the one entity that started to quickly shape the discussion around a lot of energy issues. And it's a very active think tank, fast growing within the Middle East. I will ask Mr. al-Attiyah to maybe start by responding to the theme of the United States. Is it sustainable that they can, at the prices that are offered today, is it sustainable to investment?
Oh, thank you very much. And I think, Amos, you cover a lot of, the kind of how the strategic of the new challenge of especially the gas and oil. For sure today, yes, I agree with what he said before, that the United States, a few years ago, they were so concerned about the big shortage of gas. So even we and ExxonMobil, we were so exciting about this beautiful market. What a nice market. Just to go there. So we went there. We invest over $1 billion to build the most beautiful terminal ever being built in the United States. The Golden Pass. I call it the Golden Terminal. But when the complete, I visited this terminal a few times. We are very proud that this is the first time to build the biggest. That time, United States, the fashion, everyone want to build terminal. And I think if everyone that time has received the permission, they will build more than 100 terminals. But unfortunately, when we, start, to send the first cargo, the shale gas show up. And then the Henry Hub price from $17 per million BTU under $2. It was even not to cover the cost of transportation. So we've been forced to stop any cargo there. So we just saying once what we should do with this beautiful terminal. They are at debate at the time, Then we discussed with our partner there, ExxonMobil, to say, now the only chance is to convert it to selling, to produce LNG. Yes, I agree with almost, if you say that to an American 5 years ago, or to anyone, he will shock. He will pretend it is a joke or 1st of April Fool. But then we decided, to build, to change it. Because the cost will be more or less, because only to build a regasification, but the tanks, the pipes, everything's here. But we face one problem, and I hope Mr. Amos, my friend Amos, my dear one, when he go back to Washington, D.C., sit in his office, discuss with his boss about one thing that we challenge in our terminal in Texas. The permission, we got it. Now we are in the pre-feed and the feed, but the problem is is FTA. We need a non-FTA. FTA, it's United States signed FTA with limit countries that even sometimes they cannot have effort to import. At that time, I discussed it with my friends in America, say, we want to go to Europe. Europe is a more strategy for America to creating stabilization and security of supply. If we don't go to Europe, as Amos say, well, how about, the Eastern Europe and others who need, so America should work. If the European Union will not sign FTA, but they have to work with how to deal with a special case. and as a security of supply to Europe, and give an exceptional that we can take the LNG from USA to Europe. Otherwise, then we will change this challenge. I hope Amos, when he go after the lecture to his airplane, think about it. Other things, and I don't want to talk. Just only a remark. I don't want to talk. I mean, just to explain. I will let Sultan, because when we talk, it's becoming boring. But I think through his question and his Q&A, we can find the truth.
Thank you so much.
Your Excellency, I can tell you that the good news is that we're moving forward. We just announced the movement forward and on Golden Pass on the approval process for the non-FTA. So I think you'll have.
Good.
I think you'll have.
So
good,
I give you free of charge.
But it's all thanks to what you just said now.
See how my foundation give a free advice?
Well, maybe, Amos, if I could press you on this, if you can explain to us exactly the relationship between the U.S. sort of government regulation and the market. How does it work in the U.S. and how does it affect us in the Middle East? I mean, should we worry at all, or is it just of no concern?
So first, there's no room to worry. On the contrary, I think there's room. I think what's the developments in the United States are extremely positive. First, the fact that we are producing the shale gas revolution means that we're producing a lot more gas. It also means that we're strengthening ourselves as a market for gas. We're consuming more and more. And when businesses in the United States know that there is a 100-year supply, so this is not going away, that gas is affordable and reliable, they convert businesses to gas. So what we are seeing for the first time is some certain kinds of manufacturing are coming back to the United States from other places, because even if labor costs are higher, by the fact that energy prices are lower, specifically natural gas, it is worthwhile from an investment perspective to do it in the United States. So we're already seeing that development. So we're not only creating more, we're not only producing more gas, we're also creating more consumption in the United States, which I think is a positive development. We don't regulate who gets gas. That's the private sector. Everybody can, once they convert the Golden Pass terminal, the companies involved, whether it's Exxon and Qatar, will decide who to sign contracts with based on the market alone. The United States will not make that decision. What we are bound by is the Gas Act, which decades ago told us that if you have a free trade agreement with the United States, it is automatically approved, essentially. You have to apply, but it is automatically approved. If you don't have an FTA, then we have to go through a process where our regulators have to approve the building and the constructing of the facility, of the LNG terminal. But because, as His Excellency just said, we don't have that many FTAs, if you want to count that as a market, most of the gas that we are approving is going to non-FTA. And therefore, that process is moving along. We've approved a significant amount of gas for approval, to the point that I don't believe they'll all be, I think there's doubt whether or not they will all be ultimately constructed based on today's price. Because it just has to, we have to have a market demand for it. When it comes to the relationship here in the Middle East, and I get asked this all the time, does this mean that we're competitors? Does this mean that we're breaking down the relationships between the United States and the Gulf? And I think it's exactly the opposite. We are partners. There's no doubt that the role and the terms of the relationship when it comes to energy have changed, because we're not the consumer that we were, but we're partners. We've had years of American companies investing here. The road is turning, and we're now seeing more investment. Qatar led the way, but we're seeing more investment from the Gulf and the United States. The integration and interconnection between our two regions is strengthening, and that opens up the opportunity for more close collaboration. I think it is in both of our interest for the gas markets around the world to develop, both for business purposes, to be able to sell more gas into the market, as well as what I described before from a climate perspective. We want to be able to move more around the world from coal to gas. And if you look at Southeast Asia and look at China, where they're still constructing coal power plants, when there is an abundance of gas and affordable gas. So I think that this is something that we can work on together, we can partner with. It's the purpose of my visit here, is to look at the opportunities of collaboration on these kind of areas. So I think this is a positive development.
But for that to work, you'll be looking for a minimum price. Will you also some kind of a ceiling for the price for it to help your investment and the Gulf investment, or it doesn't matter?
I think the market's going to decide what the price is. Yeah. And the development of more production is also going to determine that. We're not seeing enormous investment in new production and new wells being drilled in the United States for shale gas because of the price. Yeah. But the efficiency that's been achieved through the decline in price has allowed for very little decline in gas production. I don't know that so I think the market will take care of that. And everybody thought that the gas in the United States will go to Asia because the differential was so great. But with the prices coming down in Asia and Europe to almost parity, the distance between the United States and Asia for the transport costs is going to be such where actually Europe is going to be more of a common sense approach. And we're seeing our own neighbors in Central America, in the Caribbean, in South America, starting to think, wait a minute, we're so close to a center of gas production. We don't have the gas facilities, but maybe we should have FSRUs and new LNG terminals. And that goes back to what I said before. It's creating new markets of gas because they're affordable. So the decline in price is hurting some, but it's also creating new markets.
Thank you very much. Maybe Your Excellency al-Attiyah could tell us a little bit of how the decline in price have affected Qatar specifically over the last couple of years.
Okay, we have to understand that Qatar, when I was appointed as a minister in 1992, our production from LNG was zero. In that time, everyone knows, 1971, Qatar discovered the biggest non-associated gas in the world. Put Qatar in rank 3 after Russia and Iran. But in one opportunity, we are better than the whole our reserve from a single field. So it's easy to manage it and to operate. But the time when Shell was discovered this field, it was a big shock. Bad news, it's gas, not oil. So it was very, very disappointing to the government, even, and Shell lift it and say we don't need it. So the government take back the concession, leave it for 20 years, sleep nicely. At that time, because there is no market, for gas, we are very far away from, in that time, only in Asia, start use LNG only in that time, Japan and then Korea, and then start Taiwan, but just a small quantity. Now we are lucky in that time, even when we start to develop our LNG in the mid of 90s, the price of oil was below $10. The gas was very cheap. But we always believe, I've been in the business not 30 years, 45 years. I started working in the oil ministry in 1972. So I've been in that all my life, involved in the LNG. I saw the cycle, 73. I saw the cycle, the hits in 81 of the high oil price. I saw in 85, the oil price was $5 and $7. I saw that from 85 to 2000, the average of oil in nominal is only $17, not in real. So I saw the whole cycles of oil go up. And this is always happened. This is not the last time. This is not the first time. But we are the challenge that even today, yes, when we start to develop at that time, we succeed our challenge. I remember I invite people to talk in a conference. We sponsor it under the name of Doha Gas Conference. And I invite Sheikh Zaki Yamani as a guest of honor. So Sheikh Zaki Yamani came and he gave a speech. It was shock for us. He said he will not believe that gas has a future. And, it means that by the time that he believes that we are wasting of time, and he believed that, and he advised us, we should not waste our time and money in how to develop Qatar as a gas producer. I'm very glad I didn't hear him, and I didn't take his advice. Within just a few years, Qatar becoming the biggest LNG producers in the world, and still we are produce almost 1/3 of the whole LNG in the world, capacity of 77 million tons. Now, more than 15 years since we start, export to the whole, almost 3 continents in the world, even to Asia, even to Europe, even now to Middle East, including Dubai, Kuwait. And the biggest gas the gas consumers now today, not in some part of Asia, but this area. It will be the biggest. They need so huge of gas. So also now we contracted to supply almost to Jordan and Pakistan. We signed a big contract with Pakistan, 3.5 million tons. And also we believe there are 2 billion out of people, out of the 1/3 of the whole population, they have no existence. This microphone sometimes. Okay. So they have no access to energy. So the whole world needs energy. But today, yes, the price of energy, of gas is low. And this is normally, we see this cycle. Why so we are frightened and reacted, and we are just pretending that we have a short memories? We have to remember a few years ago, the cycle. But when the oil and gas cheap, it doesn't mean it's a good news for the consumer countries. It will create a habit that also it will face the challenge in the alternative. Because now, as I must say, if I want to build a power gas pace, it will only take me 18 months. If I want to build in coal, it will take me 3-5 years. In nuclear, 12 years. So the challenge today is the gas is the best practice and best choice as clean energy and easy. As now the technology is cheap. Now, as they say, the floating, regasification is becoming a more challenge. So I believe, today I'm not concerned about cheap price. And Qatar, it will almost now, we are a big challenge because our cost is zero. I mean, the cost sunk cost, we cover the whole cost. Now we are operating also the biggest LNG transportation fleet in the world. So we are the most flexible to be and serving our customers. Yes, there are more than 40 million tons coming from Australia, Mozambique, others, but we have to be carefully. In the price of today, they will work for cash flow only. They are not going to make profit. And this is also the other challenge. The new project in the paper, it will never exist so far because the cost also. Now the consumers, they will not talk to you about long term. They will talk to you about spot now. So also it will put the new project under the risk. LNG, you cannot store it. You cannot just, close it. You need to operate 24 hours. So there are a lot of talks about it, but...
So are you saying that under the current price, Qatar is still able and willing to invest in maintenance and development regardless?
Yes. And also, also in our challenge in how even to reduce more cost. And I am a big believer in technology. Technology solves a lot of problems. Technology, the time, when we believe it's impossible. As Amos said in some example in USA, when you talk about, other, and so the technology help in how to reduce the cost and how you make you competitive. Yes, we can, because we are still the cheapest, we are still the competitive, we can handle it, we can do it. As I say, the sunk cost we already covered for many, many years ago, so we can to compete. Our customers, they know that for a long time. A Japanese, my first customer in Japan, Chubo Electric, they came a few weeks ago in Qatar, the president and the chairman of the company, and they came to see me. They are so happy that almost we were, reached since 97, almost about 17 years or 18 years, from a supply to Japan with non-default one cargo. And this is very historical. Even our customers in India, Taiwan, Korea, even now Thailand, even our customers in Europe as Spain, Italy, UK, we supply UK by 30% of their whole needs. Even now Poland, I think next year we will start send the first cargo to Poland. We believe that we are very reliable. We are maybe one of the rare countries who has the whole chain, upstream, downstream, and transportation. When the Japan hit by the tsunami and the big earthquake, and they forced to close their nuclears, the only country we say, they ask us to supply them immediately. We converted hundreds of cargoes immediately to them because of the flexibility that we had it. The others, they don't have it. For the last 18 years, we are pioneer in the LNG business. We are a pioneer in the transportation. We are, serving our customers always. Since even when I was a minister, I have a good habit. Every year I visit my big customers, Japan. I visit India, Korea, China, and all my big, also China is a big customer. I always visit, even in Europe, even in USA, I was visiting USA every year. I start with Washington, D.C., and then I have to go to the capital, and others, to talk with congressmen, trying to educate them what it means LNG, what it means security of supply, it's a nice to talk with people. Then I go my favorite city, Houston. Smell.
The real capital.
The real capital. And people, sometimes when they talk, even when I been elected, 2011, as the president of the Climate Change COP18, even when I was elected in 2006 as the president of the Sustainable Development Conference in the United Nations, it was my big challenge in how to help, the other nations in how to replacement the clean energy. Today, the big challenge, environmental, the big challenge, what happened after Paris, how the new agreement, how they will challenge about to introduce the emission and the commitment of the emission. The world needs, today, you see how the cheap gas affected other alternatives. There are many, many alternative, companies now under a lot of pressures. Now, last week, the biggest coal company in the world in USA declared bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And also, this is a way to show you that I believe, yes, the cheap gas will attract more, consumers to replace clean and efficiency.
If you allow me to go back to Amos on the idea, the vision that you propose of collaboration, which I think is extremely admirable. particularly if it has an effect on the positive effect on the environment and so on. For that to happen, you need a forum where people could get together to debate the issues, to agree, some kind of mechanism maybe to govern the affairs, or you just leave it for the market to dictate what should happen. Earlier this week, we had this big meeting here of OPEC, and as you know, the result was non-conclusive. They came up with a conclusion, I think, that they needed more time to consider.
No, I will comment on this one.
Yes, we'll come back on this point.
Yeah,
I'd like to hear from both of you.
Okay, let me to comment first.
Okay.
I think, a few months ago, when they start to talk about how to bring the producers, non-OPEC and OPEC, I said publicly in a lot of in interview, even with Al Jazeera, even with Reuters, Blooming, all other, when they ask me what you think, I said, my advice, don't come in a conference. Don't do it unless you cook it behind the scene. And you agreed in a concrete solution, then come and announce it. But to come with a concrete solution, even an understanding, don't come. The market is so psychological. The market is oversupply. Market today oversupply 1.5 million barrels. The inventory, either SPR or commercial, almost 3 billion barrels, is the highest in the last 40 years. So I advise them, and I give them even free of advice. Don't come. Don't do it. They came here, and then after the discussions, they said in the final statement, we need more time for consultation. Why don't consultation before you come? Save your money, save your tickets, save your trips, and come and do your consultation. Oh, it's very strange. They find out after they came that they don't consult.
But that's because of the political tension in the region. And
No.
the reality is that there are very few channels to consult.
Oh, they are not.
No?
Amos,
Maybe Amos, I don't know
No,
what you
I'm
think.
enjoying this.
As an outsider, how you see it.
As an outsider, I'm enjoying this. Look, I'm still confused about the threshold questions. As you just said, we are in an oversupplied market that has been spurred to some degree by a market that was living in too high a price for too long, that created essentially incentive. No drill was too expensive. So there's been a lot of development. It's put a lot of oil on the market. That's created a glut in the market. When you have an oversupplied market and you're going to go through a major effort to freeze supply at peak production, it doesn't affect the oversupplied market because you're putting the same amount of oil on the market. So it seemed to me before the meeting, for the months that people were talking about it, that this was going to be a huge effort to produce a temporary freeze, a 4-month freeze I think they were talking about, to freeze it at the current conditions. But the current conditions are the oversupplied market.
It's the highest.
So that's my first question. My second question is, in reality, if you look around the world, we always look at spare capacity. Spare capacity in oil lives in one country only. And therefore, most countries that came to the meeting are already at a freeze because they're producing at peak capacity. Those who are producing not at peak capacity are into two groups. One group have declined already, and they can't maintain the January levels of peak capacity production. They wish they could. The other group of countries are countries that can increase production, but they don't have the technical terms for spare capacity. It's not that they can at will turn the dial and increase production, but because if you look at Iran or you look at Iraq or you look at Libya, they have the oil They just, for a variety of different reasons, they can't produce more, but they would if they could. And therefore, I think this, I don't understand, it's me, I'm sure, I'm missing something. I don't know what it is. And I think, therefore, to use my friend's terminology, this was more about the psychology of the market than it was about the market itself. And so when you ask the question about the forums for us to get together, I think companies have plenty of abilities to get together. They have no shortage of environments in which they can get together. You have OTC in Houston coming up, where you have the Offshore Technology Conference every year. You have several conferences, and companies know where to find each other. They also tend not to talk to each other as much openly when they're not one-on-one. As far as governments, we have different kinds of governments. I don't have the ability, and nobody in my government does, not even the President of the United States, to affect production levels. If he called the CEO of Exxon or Chevron or Marathon and said, I'd like you to cut production, it's a call that would never happen because it doesn't exist in our system. And it's no matter who the president is. In fact, they're likely to do the opposite just to make sure we all in government understand that they don't have to do what we say. You have other governments that are in environments where it's national oil companies and they can direct it. So we can find forums to discuss. We have an IEA, we have an IEF, we have a variety of institutions. But I have never seen a lack of conversation as a result of a lack of forum. There is, if I want to pick up the phone and call my counterparts, I can. I can get on a plane, as I did this week, and I was in Egypt and Kuwait and here, and I can see the ministers and the prime ministers and have the conversation. In other words, I don't think that we're lacking in forum. But I think the question is, what are we trying to achieve? We have a low oil environment. We are already significantly above the lows of just a few months ago. So we've already seen the market interact. We've seen hundreds of, we're in the billions of dollars of CapEx reduction by companies. That's going to cause less investment, which means that over time less oil will come onto the market. As a result, we'll see as demand continues to incrementally increase, the market will come back into balance. I'm more resistant to political intervention because it's dealing with the short term versus the long term. And I think that's a sacrifice. And this interplay, and that's why I come back to what I said before, when you look at natural gas versus oil, don't make the assumption that even if there is an intervention, or if it happens on its own, that we will wake up in the new oil environment in the same as it was before. I will add one thing to what my friend said. We have seen volatility in the oil markets since the beginning of trading. It's the nature of the business. It's a unique commodity. Nobody else invests billions of dollars on day one, not expecting a profit for years to come. It doesn't exist in other sectors the way it is, and the numbers, the sheer size and number of the dollars invested. And we've seen 1985, and we saw 1998, and we saw 2005, and every once in a while we say, will we ever see $20 oil again? Sometimes we say that when it's $9, and sometimes we say that when it's $30, and in different directions. I do think, however, that this is not the same as it was. And I think the reason for the difference is the United States. What's happening in the United States as a result of technology is introducing a new element to the cycle. And that is that unconventional oil and gas is faster to come off and faster to come back on. And it's not one, two, 3, or 5 companies that have to make that decision. It's over 4,000. So if price does go up at some point soon, they will come back, and they will come back sooner than expected. When the price was coming down from 100, everybody said that the magic number was 85, 80, 75, that shale oil or unconventional oil will come down. Wasn't the case. But in America, as in other places, what happens when you have such a destruction in price? Efficiencies. And we've seen an increase in efficiencies in the sector that have been remarkable. It means that the service companies have been hurt far more than the oil companies have. But it also means that rigs can do more for less, that the rig operators have also introduced new innovation in order to be able to do more for less. The costs are lower, which means in return that it's going to be a lower price on the way up that will incentivize increased supply. And therefore, while the discussion used to be about OPEC, I think there has to be a new discussion, which is at what price does the US production go back up? We increased production by over 1 million barrels a year for 2 years in 2013 and 14. So the question becomes, as we move back up, is there some kind of ceiling there that will be dealt with, at least in the midterm, with increased capacity of production that is a non-OPEC production, that is a non-conventional production, that did not exist in previous cycles? So I think that is something to think about as we move forward.
Great, thank you very much. I'll ask one last question of His Excellency al-Attiyah before I open the questions to the audience here. And it's about taking you back to what Qatar and the way it's adapting to the pressure on its budget today. I mean, we're all aware of the subsidies that has been reduced or in some cases removed. There are concerns that a lot of jobs are being lost in the sector. There is a tendency to replace experienced staff who maybe tend to be more expensive with cheaper staff and so on. If you could just give us an idea, a little bit of how this adaptation is going forward, in particular with the condition that you think you still can be competitive in the near future.
Okay, I think, in Qatar, this is not the first time, and I think not the last time, experience, of the fluctuation of oil price and how to manage it. We've been, create an immunity in how to challenge. And I agree, as Amos said, we just not, to react. Maybe yes, the whole oil companies in the world, not even in Qatar, the whole oil companies, they react. They cut jobs, and this is normally, it happens back in the 80s and 90s. And I remember in the 90s, in the end of 90s, beginning of 2000, when the oil price go back again very high, the big challenge and the big problems for challenge the oil companies that there is no enough engineer in the market, because many people, they convert not to go to engineering school, and they went to accounting, IT, financial. This is what they call the flourishing. When I visited back in the 90s, San Francisco, they told them, they take me to Silicon Valley, and oh, wow, everyone looking for how to make easy money, how to create a software, sell it with hundreds of millions, that time, this is the fashion. So it's the cycle, and we have to live with it. When any country in the world, they face, deficit, and when they face a deficit, how to manage it. You see, big countries, even we see countries are richer than Qatar, as Greece, as Spain, Portugal, they are almost bankruptcy. So even, the time, we see how the deficit, the time when they talk about more economy in the world being affected by the growth and negatives. Now with China, the second, growth, economy, the strongest economy in the world now, they're facing a lot of challenge, and they're facing, a deficit, and, and even in India and others. So, but, we believe, and as I agree with Amos, in the business, in our energy, the price will go back again. This is a cycle, This is, we know that every time when the oil price go cheap, it's different than the 90s and the 80s. In the 90s and the 80s, in that time, still, there are not a lot of countries, they've been developed. They are mostly non-developed at the time. Now it changed. Even in Africa, even in Asia, we see a new market for LNG. In Jordan, in Pakistan, even in Dubai, even in Kuwait, even in the middle, the world, they call it oil-based countries, they will, consume gas and will consume more energy. Now, even the Middle East, what a challenge now, even among the oil producers in the Middle East, or even in any part of the problem, the challenge them is the domestic consumptions has become more growth, more bigger. So the consume now start in their own local market, is maybe triple than what before 10 years ago. So this is always because they need a development. When you need a development, you need to consume more. When you have a growth, you consume more. And the deficit in the budget is normally, this is not, the new things. A lot of countries, they face it, but how to manage it, and they will manage it. We can also cut jobs, not, to look for a cheap job. No, this is not true. You are not even in our energy industrials. You will not cut a good engineer to bring a bad engineer or a foreman to work on behalf of an engineer. This is not the way of our business. But as Amos say, is a technology. Today, and it used to be when we built a platform in the sea, is full of people. Today is a satellite platform, no man. It used to be when we built a power station. For instance, we built what Ras Gurtas power station, 2,730 megawatt with almost 60 million imperial gallon of desalination. It's only run by 120 people. Right. So technology today, it helps, it solves a lot of problems. It makes you more efficient, less cost. So this is now the challenge. Today, for instance, when I want to inaugurate one of our ship in Korea, the biggest LNG tanker ever built in the world, we call the Q-Max. We have 14 of them or 15. Every one capacity 265,000 cubic meters. It's about 10 football ground of the size. I went there, it's huge. I walk there, I lost 2 kilos. So it's nice to walk there. But how many people running this ship? 15 people. Really? Including the cook.
That's amazing.
Because it's all autopilot. So it's change. In the world, I am a big believer in the technology. Technology always solves a lot of problems, and it will make you more efficient. So I'm not worrying about, the change. I'm not worrying, cutting jobs. It's normally people, now you see how many banks, they cut a lot of jobs, oil companies, others, IT companies, telecommunication companies. Sometimes people, they say we are concerned about jobs, Yes, when I must say, they have to cut jobs, but, and yes, I agree. Technology, unfortunately, against the human being. I feel sympathize. I put myself on the others. I always think if I lost my job, and the technology is my enemy, because it makes solution for, how to lose jobs. So I agree with you. I remember, when the first platform, we built it early 80s, I visited, it's full of people there. Then later, a few years ago, we built a big, platform with no man. No one there. It's a satellite. You can full operation and gas separation, operation, with only just from time to time a helicopter go with a technician to check about everything is okay. He talked to himself, not to others. So then he went back. So I believe, we always, this is our challenge. We run concerning about budget, subsidizing, everything will change. Yes. Because the time, always you are trying, to the motivation about how the reality and how you move and how you solve problems. This is the mathematics. And we always, now, today, I always say, we are in era. It has a lot of change.
Thank you so much, and thank you both. It's been absolutely fascinating. And we could stay discussing this between us for hours.
Oh,
but we owe it to the audience, because we're only left with 10 minutes.
Okay.
We owe it to the audience to ask a couple of questions. And I'll take a round of 3 questions first. And if you can, please, we'll start with you. Introduce yourself as you ask the question, if you may.
Yeah, my name is Tariq from German news agency. My question is for both distinguished guests. Now we are living in a new reality. The oil producers from outside the non-OPEC countries, and the OPEC right now represents third of the world production, oil production. So do we enter the era for reconsider the oil market, and do the world need now for new organization instead of OPEC?
I don't think so.
Sorry, let's take 2 more questions and then we'll come back to you.
Okay, no, let me, I believe
Please.
them. Okay.
Hi, Iyas Hmouz من Jada Energy. Very interesting indeed. Thank you, gentlemen. Indeed, as we're transforming from the oil market into a gas market, the gas market itself is transforming from regional and local gas markets driven by pipeline into a singular market for LNG. And that in turn is going to impact the price. As Amos said, probably we're going to see a delinking between the oil price and the gas price. Would this lead into forming an OPEC similar cartel for the gas producers? A few years ago, we heard about a troika between Russia, Iran, and Qatar, probably specifically for gas.
Already there.
Would this still be the case? And this is from Mr. al-Attiyah. And Amos, what would be the U.S. Reaction to having such an organization for gas? Thanks.
Thank you. Let me stop here, because these 2 questions are kind of related.
I think about
and come back to you on
about the organization.
Yeah.
We already established an organization, and the headquarters in Qatar, and I was one of the founders back, a few years ago, and we met in Moscow, and the whole oil gas producers, and then we have the debate where we should be allocated. So Russia, nominate Peter Bisberg, and Algeria they nominate Wahran, Iran they nominate Shiraz, I nominate Doha. And finally, we win in Moscow by voting. This is the first time we win in Moscow, in a free democratic, election, so we win by 2 votes. And now it's in the headquarters. But it's different than OPEC. OPEC, it's how you cut the production. In gas, it's almost very difficult to cut the production because you have long-term contract, take-and-pay contract, and no flexibility to storage LNG. So you have to, this is the difference. But we create this organization to talk about cooperation, to talk about how to see management, how to create, to convince, consumer to replace gas against alternative as coal or others. How we can concentrate and to bring, and to send a message to whole world. Please use, gas is the best alternative to you. So this is the way how to attract. And now the headquarters in Qatar, and it's a very active to create a lot of. To create another, this is already OPEC. I'm a big believer. If we don't have OPEC, we should create OPEC, because at least it's a body to talk with, even with the consumers. Today, the IEA, it used to be they created as against OPEC. Today, IEA and OPEC, they talk to each other. They work with each other. They trying, work as creating the security of supply, the convince even IF and so also this is an organization to create a consumer producers dialogue. So the world today, the fighting with each other is no more. I remember, the International Oil Company, when they were their relation with the National Oil Company very, very bad. Yeah. They challenge, especially in the mid of 70s, and and they start, what they call it, I call it the unholy war, because IOC, they not happy because of the takeover or the NEC. But when I become a minister, I have my own logo. I visit the whole, IOC companies, even in Europe and America at that time. And I say with my message, both, we don't beat anyone. If you don't beat me and I don't beat you, join me. Because today we believe now that we can work together and we can be partners. I need you because of your technology, about your marketing capability, your financial capability. And also you need me because of my reserves and my, and our, natural resource. We can work together, equal.
From a U.S. perspective,
we have a slightly different, obviously the United States, we have a slightly different perspective on OPEC and so on. But look, as I said before, I think when OPEC is 99.9% at peak production of capacity, and only one country has spare capacity in Saudi Arabia, and you have new producers coming online, and a greater share of the market is non-OPEC, I think that speaks for itself as to where the future of OPEC lies. As far as gas, I think it's okay to have conversations and discussions in organizations such as my friend just discussed. We obviously won't join, but I think at the end of the day, if you want to look at the challenges to create a cartel on gas, it's almost impossible for all the reasons that were just mentioned. In addition to that, it's the democratization of the gas market around the world is in full swing. We have countries joining the club of producers every day. And we may see Mozambique and Tanzania get to production, and then they will join. So I don't see it as a relevant conversation for the future. I think the LNG market is well established. The traders are already well established. They're getting stronger, and you have 15-year contracts, side-by-side spot market contracts. So who's going to start playing with the production? So I just don't see it. And with the Australia and the United States joining the club, the Qatar club of major producers and major exporters, I think the market is on its own.
Thank you very much. We'll take one last round of questions. Please, in the back.
My name is Masood Akram. I'm from Pakistan Embassy. My question is a little beyond both of the eminent speakers discussed about the technology. As a layman, my question, a century back, people would be making fun, a city flying in the air, only a century back. Talking of Alvin Toffler's third wave, perhaps we have already into fourth wave. So what is the future of, oil and gas altogether when technology is, at a rampant pace advancing into new eras? And we already have, for example, a prototype aircraft flying purely on solar energy, a flight taking off from New Zealand to America on biogas. So alternate energy is coming to, really into reality. And there's there's an assessment that perhaps in next 15 years, all the domestic energy will shift onto solar. Solar energy is also becoming very cheap. So what is the future of oil and gas altogether in midterm terms? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Please, Zakaria.
My question to His Excellency Hamad al-Attiyah. We know that there is a glut in the LNG market. New players are coming. The club of exporters and importers are coming more and more. My question to you from 10 years, why don't you diversificate your economy? Why are you depending on hydrocarbons all the time when the shock is coming so severe? If you diversificate, now Saudis start to diversify their economy. When will you start diversificating yours and not to be a hydrocarbonic country? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll take one last question, please, here at the right-hand side. Yes, give him your microphone.
Yes, thanks. Mohammed Sergi, Bloomberg News. My question is about supply to Ukraine specifically. A few years ago, I think Qatar, Turkey, and Ukraine had a trilateral, I guess, meetings to discuss, or at least figure out ways to supply Ukraine. And I'm wondering now, with the U.S. becoming an exporter and also looking at increases in Russian and Norwegian gas to Europe, how are we going to get LNG to Ukraine through the Black Sea and through the Bosphorus?
Thank you very much.
I'm happy
If
to
I
take the
start
first and the
with
third,
Amos.
but I'm not going to touch the second. That I'll leave to my friend here.
On the alternative sources.
On alternative sources, there's no doubt. That's what I was saying before. I think we're going towards a transformation in the world of energy. Renewable energy is going to grow exponentially. But even with the exponential growth, we're going to see hydrocarbons being part of it and be with us for decades to come. That's why I think LNG is so important, because gas, I believe, is a transition fuel that is effective to go there. You can't simply bring on renewable energy at massive amounts without also have tremendous investments into the infrastructure of delivery, and because you need stability on the grid. The challenges in India when they had a power outage for 700 million people was not because of a lack of generation, but because of infrastructure. Bringing on, in an uncontrolled manner, enormous amount of renewables is a challenge in of itself and should be done, but while looking at the stability of the grid itself. So I think that renewable energy is coming. I think it's going to grow. It will continue to grow, but we're not out of the era of hydrocarbons quite yet. As far as the question on Ukraine, I think this is it's a great question. Ukraine used to get 50% of its gas from Russia, and the rest of Eastern Europe received its gas via Ukraine. Ukraine this year, as a result of a collective effort of the United States and Europe and Ukraine together, will have its first year in history where they did not burn any molecule of gas that they directly bought from Russia. Some of it's Russian molecules from other means. And that was achieved through change in regulatory policy, reverse flow of the pipelines from Slovakia, from Poland, from Hungary, and I think that's only going to grow. The LNG terminals that I think are going to be coming in the coming year, 2 years, in places like Ukraine, in places like Croatia and Kirk Island, in Greece, into Bulgaria, will allow Ukraine to have more access to international gas because the integration and interconnection in Europe must continue. There is one major threat to that, and Russia does not want to see the reality that I just described. And the threat to that is Russia building a major new pipeline to Germany called Nord Stream 2. This is a danger and a threat to the diversification in Europe, and a real threat to an ability to bring new sources into Europe, and a potential collapse of Ukraine, as it will take away $2 billion of revenue from Ukraine that it cannot replace of transit. That is the old way of thinking. It is relying on energy as a political weapon and tool, something that we have to get together and tell anybody who wants to do that around the world, that is part of the past. The future has to be an energy around collaboration and integration, not a political tool. So I think that we have Ukraine as a prime example of what is possible when you cooperate, and the threat of what is still out there in the world that we cannot ignore, which is using energy as a political tool and weapon against other countries.
I will also talk about Ukrainian, and I've been in Ukraine and Kiev. I've been, in Turkey. That time, we talk with Butas and others, how the Turkey that time, to be the gate of supply to Eastern Europe, The time, we say, the decision, we are a supplier. We are ready to supply any customers immediately. But the decision is the customer, how to build the LNG, how he will, Turkey and Ukraine, how they will build the net, how the Eastern Europe, the time. I heard, even in Croatia, they talk about build, LNG terminal for 10, 15 years. You need the gas to take the decision, not to talk about what you will do. The time, every time, I met a delegation from Ukrainian, from Croatia, from many Bulgaria and Hungary. They will start to talk about terminals, about, how to create a different of supplier, security of supplier. They will talk to you hours about it. I listen very carefully. I always clean my ear and listen to my cousin. But then I say, when you will do it, we are ready. Call me. We will supply. We will supply any customers. We don't play politics. We never interfere with our customers. We always respect our commitment. We never even mix politics with our suppliers. Even sometimes we have a dispute politically with this country and this country, but we never put, all our contracts in the middle or trying, to blackmail our customers. We always respect our, our commitment. This is why we are very successful and why we have a good trust with all our customers, and we are prove it. So I hope, you ask your country when they will build at the terminal, and then we will be happy, to supply. I always believe, I learn in my business, don't as producers, I will never independent in one supplier. And also as supplier, also I advise them, don't independent in one supplier. I always believe 3 suppliers better than 2, but 4 better than 3. This is what I learned, even for consumers or producers. Because the time you always believe that you are reliable. As I say to you, Qatar is a break record with their own consumers for the last 18, 20 years. We never default in one cargo. Your question about...
Very briefly, because we're running out of time.
No, but his question, I don't want him to,
think you're avoiding
Yeah, to avoid. Yeah, yes, we always talk, and every country in the world to talk about diversification, how you can diversification, how we can, what is the best of diversifications. You see, Qatar is a small country, is a very dry country. We have, even all our water, 99% come from desalination. Agriculture is not good for, we don't, one of our choice because we cannot do it. We are one of the biggest producers in fertilizer in the world. We produce more than 8 million tons of urea. We only consume 5,000 tons a year here. So we import to 95 countries of urea. So the way we help the others, and how, to protect. But also, yes, we have to, when you talk about Saudi Arabia is a huge country with a different climate, different, ways and means. But, yeah, we have, also how to invest, how, to, the government or even the, the sovereign fund, how to, we always concern, and this is always we talk about it after oil and gas. We know oil and gas is a depleted resource. We know even when we say our gas and oil will take us 100 years from now, even 100, for me and for you it's long, but for a nation it's short. Always we debate that, and we already debated for years. We always ask ourselves, what after on oil gas? we always believe that diversification is a very important in how to survive. We include also education. This is our big challenge. We brought the best universities from United States and Europe and others. This is also one of the area that how to create a nation with a very strong education. When we create our women, our men, and they graduate from the best universities, the best. This is what our challenge in the future. We always believe education is the big challenge. We will, and this is why we believe that we will, and we understand, and I can assure you, it's in our mind. We are a nation who lived in this country 60 years ago. If you come to this country, you will not find even elementary school. You cannot find even no power, no electricity, even no doctor. Even we never saw a nurse. How this nation resists in a country is very dry. Even though they drink brackish water from wells, but they survive. And they never left their country. And they die in this country. In the time, even 1941, 1/3 of the whole population died by hunger and by disease because of the Second War and the collapse of the barrel, diving for barrel. But we never. I remember I asked my grandfather once. I was born in 1953, when the first elementary school was open, because the first oil cargo left in 1949. And the time even when they opened the elementary school, even they cannot find a teacher in Qatar, because 95% of people, they cannot read and write. And we bring a lot of teachers from the whole Arab world, including, President Abbas from Palestine. He was teaching in Qatar, and I know him, Abu Ayyad, Mahmoud al-Khatib, Mahmoud al-Maghribi. There are a lot of big names. They were teaching in Qatar, and they had a very strong role in their own country later on. So we believe, as I said, we asked my grandfather once, but how you resist? How this, you're a Qatari, you don't think to leave? He said, once I went to, to the eastern of Saudi Arabia, and I went there for a few days, and I felt so homesick. So next day, I went back to the Qatar. So you see, you will live and we will die. And don't be worried. We lived more tougher than that, this one. And we are ready to challenge it. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This is a great way to conclude. I don't think we can, I won't even attempt to summarize what was said today, except to say that it left us really feel much more positive and encouraged. I think the whole tone has been very constructive. The way forward is still there in terms of positive growth and mutual benefits on all sides. So thank you very much to all. Thank you to our audience. This has been part of our discussion and focus around our energy agenda. Those of you who follow the work of the Brookings Doha Center would know that annually we have the Energy Forum this time of the year. But we too have had to adapt with the changes in context. And we're very pleased that we've been able to make use of the visit of Mr. Amos and the presence of His Excellency Abdullah al-Attiyah. Thank you very much.